Earth could be destroyed by something you can't even see. Not a giant asteroid. Not a nuclear missile. Antimatter. It sounds like science fiction, but the terrifying truth is simple. When antimatter touches ordinary matter, both can vanish in a violent burst of energy. So what would happen if someone actually built an antimatter bomb? First, you need to understand what makes antimatter so strange. Every ordinary particle has a corresponding opposite. Electrons have positrons. Their properties are nearly identical, except their charges are reversed. And this is where it gets weird. Put a particle and its antiparticle together, and they annihilate. Instantly, their mass is converted into energy, producing extremely powerful gamma-ray radiation. That sounds like the ultimate weapon. But there's a catch. You can't simply scoop antimatter into a container and carry it around. The container itself is made of normal matter. The moment the antimatter touches it, the reaction begins. So scientists would need to keep it suspended using electromagnetic fields, such as a pinning trap. Sounds easy. It isn't. If the power maintaining that field disappeared, even for a moment, the antimatter could slam into the container walls. And that would be the end of your experiment. But surviving the storage problem isn't even the biggest obstacle. It's getting enough antimatter in the first place. Here's the part that completely changes the story. Even if you somehow gathered all the antimatter humanity has ever managed to produce, you'd still have an absurdly tiny amount. We're talking roughly 10 nanograms. That sounds microscopic because it is. And if that amount somehow exploded on your fingertip, it wouldn't create the planet-destroying blast you imagined. It would be dangerous, but nowhere near a doomsday weapon. So the real question becomes, what if we could somehow get much, much more? Imagine traveling around the solar system, collecting antimatter until you finally had half a kilogram. Now we're talking. Half a kilogram of antimatter, reacting with half a kilogram of ordinary matter, would release energy on the scale of roughly 19 megatons of TNT. That's enormous. But here's the strange part. Even that still wouldn't automatically make it the ultimate weapon. The Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba remains the most powerful nuclear device ever detonated, with a yield of around 50 megatons. An antimatter device containing roughly 1.1 kilograms of antimatter could theoretically reach a comparable energy release. And then comes the explosion. A gigantic fireball. A towering column of dust. A mushroom cloud reaching deep into the atmosphere. But no one should be celebrating the technology yet. Because there is another problem hiding behind all that destruction. The price. And that number is almost more unbelievable than the explosion itself. Antimatter is considered one of the most expensive substances humans could produce. 1 gram could cost tens of trillions of dollars. Not millions. Not billions. Trillions. So your ultimate supervillain weapon has an unexpected weakness. The budget. And this is where everything changes. The biggest barrier isn't imagination. It isn't even engineering. It's production. Creating antimatter requires enormous amounts of energy and extremely sophisticated equipment, while keeping the particles isolated is incredibly difficult. So the dream of casually building an antimatter bomb collapses under one brutal reality. You'd need unimaginable resources just to create and preserve enough material to make it truly devastating. But here's the craziest part. The same phenomenon that makes antimatter terrifying is also what makes it scientifically fascinating. If matter and antimatter can transform their mass into extraordinary amounts of energy, could humanity eventually learn to control that process for something useful? Could antimatter someday become a revolutionary energy source? Could the technology designed to understand destruction eventually help unlock something far more powerful? That's the twist. The ultimate doomsday weapon isn't really the story. The real mystery is what humanity might discover while trying to control the most extreme collision in the universe. Because if we ever learn how to handle antimatter safely, what happens when we finally